And I found a perfect one today from Napoleon Bonaparte. A leader is a dealer in hope. And you will soon find out that Gwen Brown and her husband, Ronald Smith, live this sentiment and they work this sentiment in their work with Freedom Foundation and RATCO. And you'll learn more about that. Are you intrigued? RATCO? What could that be? So welcome to the Recreation and Outdoor Education Leadership Speaker Series. I am Brooke Moran, Professor of Recreation and Outdoor Education, or ROE, and the director of this series. So a lot of you know, I see mostly students here, a lot of, rec students. But in the program, one of the cornerstones is to teach people about leadership. And leadership isn't just a skill for the outdoors in the Roe major. It's a skill that's used throughout life in a variety of settings and in a multitude of disciplines. We have students who go to many different sectors and use the leadership skills garnered here. So the way we try to foster those skills is through theory, through practice, both in the classroom and out in the community and internships, things like that, and also interacting with a variety of leaders. So this series is not only formed to engage Roe students with a variety of leaders, but also the community. So we can learn from diverse people, from a variety of disciplines, from sort of throughout all walks of life. If you missed Dr. Richard Southall or Malcolm Daly's talks, please visit the archives at www.western.edu/LSS for Leadership Speaker Series. So all the archives will be there, the videos, and Gwen's will probably be up probably mid-time next week. And of course you came to hear from Gwen tonight, who will be introduced shortly. But on November 10th, Tyler Hamilton will be visiting. He's a best-selling author, and we'll talk about the insidious and destructive power of lying, as well as the transformational power of truth. And that's through his lens as a pro cyclist in the doping scandal. So, and then stay tuned about spring speakers. And just as a little teaser, we have someone coming who was on the Everest expedition that discovered Mallory's body, and he recently did a summit to sea of the Ganges to raise awareness about the importance of fresh drinking water for all populations. And we have someone who in 2014 won the National Geographic Explorer of the Year Award, and he works with vets to help them move back into life after, after combat. So little bits of information, please silence your cell phones. There are cards like this. They should be on the, Heidi, would you mind grabbing that stack and passing them along? And Amanda, I think you have some. But they have a little blurb about Tyler, as well as you know, where and when, that kind of thing. So please take one of those if you'd like. Our plan with this series is to partner with entities throughout campus and with entities and individuals in the community, because in a small town, in a small school, we generally have limited resources. But together, we can bring in phenomenal people like Gwen. So dream big. Who do you want to see on this campus? Where are they from? How can they inspire us? And please contact me. My information is on here. So let's bring phenomenal people in that we can learn from. In particular, thanks to our partners this time for Gwen's visit, Multicultural Affairs, Political Science, Masters in Environmental Management, First-Year Seminar, and Communication Arts, Languages, and Literature Department. Let's give a little. Thank you all for that. So, please welcome Sally Romero, Director of the Multicultural Affairs Center, or just Director of Multicultural Affairs, and Dr. Paul Edwards, who is the chair of, I gotta make sure I I say it right, Communication Arts, Languages, and Literature Department, who knew Gwen when she was a student here, and they will introduce her.
Can you hear us from this? Okay, we're going to just stay down here and visit with you. Thank you so much. I cannot tell you how excited I was to find out that Gwen would be visiting our campus. And I am so honored to be able to do a brief introduction along with Paul. Gwen was a student here a while back, it seems like yesterday, and she has been taking challenges on head first as long as I've known her. During her time here, she served as an RA. She worked at the front desk of the University Center, or the College Student Union at that time. She was very involved in the Multicultural Center. She was involved with Quizbee. She was part of our Student Government Association. She had her hand in so many pots across campus that there wasn't anybody that didn't know her. And she, like I said, she wasn't afraid of leadership. She took on every challenge that was out there, and she excelled at it. She's an amazing person. She spent some time with my students yesterday, and like I told them the entire week as we built up for this, or 2 or 3 weeks, she's infectious. I mean, you do not leave her presence without feeling like you're a better person, just being around her. And I'm really excited for you to hear her speak tonight about all the wonderful things she's doing and how she continues to make a difference as she strives to make everybody's life that she comes in contact with better. Paul, speak a little bit.
All right, thanks. And Sally, that was a great prep, because you heard what she said about Gwen's involvement in co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So it fell to me and others to remind her that she was here also to gain an education, and that was more classroom oriented. And so that was a give and take. Just to give you an example, she knows I'm going to say this, so I'm not surprising her. This is a woman who has, for as long as I can remember, spoken all over the United States, gives speeches everywhere in all sorts of contexts. She failed public speaking once the first time. Just to give you an idea, and that sort of leads into what I just wanted to say about Gwen is, as a lot of you know, you've been hearing this whole thing about the Western stories that describe this community. That's been kind of an ongoing theme this year. And Gwen really does embody those Western stories, those Western narratives. She's someone who didn't let anything stop her, including saying, people like you don't do that. Just because people said women don't play football didn't prevent her from playing football and being, you're going to probably talk about that, so I'm not going to steal your speech, but she might talk to you about the playing of the football thing. She started as she helped to start the Rocky Mountain region of Fox Sports. I remember at the time you left another job to go to Fox, didn't you? And I thought she was crazy at the time because I thought, what's the future in Fox Sports? It's the 4th network. What's it going to do? To show you how up on things I was. So she did that. You were the only woman at the management level. So this is what Gwen's been doing, and I think what Gwen is going to talk to you tonight is about moving away from one thing that felt really good, secure, and fulfilled her life to something riskier, but that has fulfilled her life even more. So that I don't give your speech for you, Gwen Brown.
Hello, we're gonna show a quick video, and this is just a little music video to get us started. This was actually written for the work that we're doing in Selma, and I'll explain it afterwards, but I thought this would be a great way to introduce you to some of the joy and despair and hard things and great things that we're doing in Selma. So take a look at I Will Dance, the music video.
Sally, could you grab minutes? Thanks.
Hello, you're on the air.
Why do you guys think blacks and whites should be together? I don't think black and white should be together. I think that blacks should go their skew and whites should go their skew. I don't think blacks should be with white. I think that's wrong.
I will sing, I will fight. See no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand. Moving mountains with these hands, and I will dance. 1, 2, 3. Waiting, waiting, the lines for love to cross our fading. Slow down, no now, no matter where you go, you'll be alright. I can feel a change in me tonight. I will sing, I will fly, see no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand, moving mountains with these hands. I will dance. I will dance. Pictures, whispers, spread the love. You're all my sisters and brothers, lovers. Relationships don't see in colors. I hope you see the change in me. I will sing, I will fight, see no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand, moving mountains with these hands. I will dance. I will dance.
One day right down in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and black girls and sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
I will sing, I will fight. I see no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand. Tell me that you understand. I will sing, I will fight. I will sing, I will fight. I will love, I will stand. I will dance, I will dance. I will sing, I will fight. See no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand. Tell me that you understand. I will sing, I will fight. See no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand. Moving mountains with these hands. I will dance. See no darkness through these eyes. I will love, I will stand. Tell me that you understand.
That's a little music video, and I kind of am starting at the end, so I'll come back to that. And I realized while we were watching the video that it could really be just for me that we watch that, because it inspires me. Every time I see it, it makes me so happy, because those are all the young people that I get to work with on a daily basis that are overcoming incredible things just to live, just to be in a normal space that you and I can take for granted often. So I will get to that, because that's sort of the end of the story, but I wanted to start out from the beginning, and Paul really helped. That was really my opening line, was that I failed public speaking, because I thought that way, if this didn't go well, then you would understand. I mean, there was already the preface to say that this may not go well, right? And then we have nowhere to go but up. So if it was good, then everybody would say, like, gosh, who was that teacher? That was ridiculous. But I thought it was only a win. The truth is, I failed public speaking. I think it's the only course I failed here. I wasn't a great student. I was okay. I did good enough to get through and to learn some things. But so much of what I learned at Western came outside of the classroom. But you know, one could make the case that I failed with that other teacher, so I could take you for public speaking. In which case I did pass. I'm not sure what the grade was, but that's not important. So it's good to be here. I have not been on Western State Colorado University's campus in 15 years. When I was here before, it was Western State College. That was a little simpler, rolls right off the tongue, except for some of you that maybe have only known it as the university. Taylor Hall looked a lot different. It was just a brick building then. There was nothing fancy about it. We actually had the student union here, and you ate at a place named after a cannibal. I think it was Taco Bell that you ate at Packers, right? Was it Packard? Packard. You know, so things have changed. I mean, we all worked out at Escalante. So, I mean, this is amazing. What has happened here is incredible. But what is so beautiful is that some things have stayed the same, including some really rich, incredible people. And it has been great to see some of my old friends and to eat familiar food, like the omelet sandwich I used to have all the time at the Firebrand. So it's good to be here. And hopefully, along with some of the buildings and other things that have changed, so has the public speaking situation. We'll see. I have to say, I said to one of the classrooms earlier, I love the learning elevated thing. Like that, is that like the motto? That's like a motto or something, tagline. And I love it, and that word elevated has been on my mind since I've been on campus yesterday morning. And it's incredible because I think we should live like that. We should live kind of elevated, right? Like we should do great things, not just here, but when we go out from here. And I think that is what my experience has been and what I would like to share with you all this evening. I love that Brooke had the vision to do this speaker series, and the diversity of it, I think, speaks a lot to you as a person and what you know about people, and that is that there's a lot of things that inspire people in different ways. And I love the stories. When I first heard about the speaker from last week and the speaker next week, I was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, I have all my limbs, I've never written anything. I mean, it's just incredible, but I feel really privileged to be part of the series, especially because Western has played such a special part of my life. And again, not because I was some great student, but because I came here and found a way to get involved in a lot of things that did probably more for me than I could have ever done for those activities. So anyway, I like the idea of living elevated. I'm going to take that with me when I leave from here. We have an alternative spring break program that's caught on like crazy in Selma with the work that we do. So we have students from all over the country and even all over the world. We had a group from New Zealand just a few weeks ago that come to do service learning with the work that we do in Selma. And it took us a little bit of time, but we realized that we kind of live alternatively. So it offers a very natural alternative break for people that come and visit. And you're all invited to come for an alternative spring break or winter break or fall break or whatever break you have. So I love being here. I feel very much at home and also inspired to think back to where I was 15 years ago. That's when I graduated in 1999, which makes me old enough to be most of your mother. I realize that sounds like a long time ago, but it doesn't feel that long, especially when I see Sally and Paul and nobody's aged. I have aged a little bit, hopefully in wisdom also. But I always knew it was in me to do something really different and special, and I thought everybody maybe felt like that. You know, and I grew up and I wished on every penny and every falling star that I would grow up and be Wonder Woman, which I thought was probably normal. And then as I got older, those dreams maybe shifted and matured just a little bit. And so I came to a place when I was in high school where I wanted to play football and I wasn't going to let anybody tell me that I couldn't. And I tried out for the football team at my high school, Arapahoe High School in Littleton, Colorado, where there were a lot of students at the school and football was a big deal. And I tried out for the football team and I made it. And it was probably, at that point, one of the most rewarding and challenging things that I did because it wasn't necessarily a popular choice with a lot of my teammates and coaches and teammates' parents. I think my parents probably suffered more than I realized because they weren't necessarily the popular people at all those booster meetings and things. But I think that was the time that I really saw leadership for the first time. I had a head coach that would get in his little mint green BMW and drive alongside of us when we would run after practice. We had to run a couple miles on the pavement in our full gear and our cleats. We had to run a couple miles and my coach would get in his little BMW and drive along next to us to make sure nobody cut corners or nobody did anything that wasn't exactly what he wanted us to do. And my position coach, the one that really I felt like believed in me, he ran with us. And I noticed something about that there was something about that coach that made me want to play for him. Because he was not only interested in telling us what to do and inspiring us and training us to do it, but he was willing to do it with us. And that's when I started to understand that leadership that does what it asks you to do is very motivating. And what happened, his name is Coach Knaufel, and Coach Knaufel made me want to run a little bit harder and run a little bit further because I knew he would be in it with me. And that was how we felt all through the whole season. And it's so funny, I didn't find out until a few years ago that it wasn't necessarily that Coach Knaufel believed in me. You see, I went to meet him and introduce myself to him and say, hey, my name is Gwen, I want to play on the offensive line. I'll be trying out for football this year. And he gave me a workout book and said, hey, if you can get to these levels, it was the CU linesman, the line of CU's requirements, as far as their 40 time, their squats, all these requirements. And he said, you've got to hit all these times and weights. And I was like, that is great. And I worked out like a maniac, and I got there. And he said, you make yourself an athlete, I'll make you a football player. I did it. I worked out like a crazy person. And I got in the best shape of my life. I ended up squatting more than anyone on my football team that year, 500 and some pounds. And I came to spring training, or whatever it was that we had to come to. I think actually it was 2-a-days. My coach really believed in 2-a-days so much we did 3-a-days. So I showed up to 3-a-days and said, Coach Knopfel, I did it. I did everything you asked me to do. And he's like, okay, let's go. And he taught me everything I needed to know, because really one of the things I was up against was not just that I was a woman, but I had never played full contact football, and these boys were big, and they'd been playing for a long time, you know? And it wasn't until a couple years ago I went back to Littleton to tell my coach about what we're doing in Selma and thank him for believing in me, because he believed in me, I could believe in other people, and he said, I really appreciate it, but I gotta tell you, I didn't believe in you at all. And I was like, but the thing, you told me, like, I remember you saying, be an athlete, I'll make you a football player. You did that. And he said, I gave you a workout that was impossible. And I said, well, you didn't tell me that. So it worked out. I mean, he did not tell me that I shouldn't be able to do the workout. So there was nothing in me that thought I shouldn't make it, right? So I still credit him with so much of what I've been able to do, because I had somebody that believed in me and then fought alongside of me to get us to our best level. And that is something that I hope that I model in any kind of leadership I'm given. I went on, after high school, I came to Western, as Miss Sally said, I was very involved. And some of that was, again, not because it was noble or because I was some great person. I came to Western, and a few weeks later it was like, what have I done? There's nothing to do here. I don't know anybody. I lived in Ute Hall, which at the time was all women. You know, remember, I just graduated high school, I was on a football team. I didn't have very many girlfriends. And so I got to Ute Hall, I was like, what do I do here? There's curfews, there's rules. And I went to CSU every weekend, because that's where my friends were. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna transfer to CSU. This is not for me. There's not a lot to do there. I'm gonna transfer. And at some point I was driving back from Fort Collins, and I thought, you know what, if I'm gonna transfer, I'm gonna give this thing everything I have. I'm gonna come back to Western, I'm gonna get involved, and I'm just gonna run it out, and then I'll transfer, but I'm not gonna do it without giving myself a little bit more taste of the experience, right? So I came back and I got involved at Quizby, and I found out there was a TV station on campus. I started getting involved in the TV station and intramural sports, and started teaching aerobics. I worked at Mario's, because I think that's what everyone should do at some point in their life. I mean, I just did everything I could. Anything that was remotely interesting, I got involved with. And I fell in love with this campus. And I ended up staying here not just 4 years, I stayed 5. And I loved it. It definitely taught me a lot about me, but also about being involved in the extracurricular things. And I got, starting my freshman year, got internships. I got every job I ever applied for. And it ended up being a great experience. You know, no one ever asked me to see my grades. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that to the current students, but I don't think anyone really cares. I mean, it's great to have the degree, but no one ever actually asked me to see it. I mean, my dad used to say, just get a degree in PE, do something, and which is not easy, because I did major in kinesiology. But it doesn't, I mean, just having the whole experience and getting the degree set me up for so much that would happen after this. And when I finished my time at Denison, I got a one-way ticket to Los Angeles, and I worked on movie sets, and I just lived the big life in LA until I realized how un-American it is to live in a city without an NFL team. And so I moved back to Colorado. And when I moved back to Colorado, I got a job at the NBC affiliate, which is 9 News in Denver, which was a big deal, because sometimes you don't get those kinds of opportunities when you haven't worked in some small market station, if there's any communications majors in here. And so that was a great thing. They also started a women's professional football league, and I thought, who else, how many girls have played football? This is perfect. So I started getting paid to play football and travel around the country and work for 9 News, and it was this incredible life, and I thought it was so great, but I wasn't quite as fulfilled as I hoped I would be. So I was looking for the next big thing. And that's when I got the call from Fox Sports Network, hey, we're starting up a shop. We'd love to have you be part of the team. You can make your own schedule, we'll give you a raise. Because I was working that 3 in the morning shift at the editing and producing the morning news. So it didn't take a lot to convince me to leave. And plus it was sports. I mean, I was gonna get paid to watch the Broncos play football, paid to go interview Colorado Avalanche players, paid to be on the floor of the Nuggets games. I thought that was a trick, but I did it. And I worked for Fox Sports Network for a while, and then I found that thing again, looking for that next big thing. Because it just felt like there was more, even though I was doing all these things that I thought would make me so happy or be the ultimate things, the things that I dreamed about. I already was doing them. I was 25, and I had gotten to do all these things, and still I was just plagued with this feeling that there was more to do. And I love the quote. Dr. King says, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. And he said, you don't need to have a college degree to serve. You don't need to be able to make your subject, like, I don't even remember the quote, but you don't need your subject and your verb to agree to serve. You just need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And I think that something happened to me that made me realize that there was something in me to do, but it had nothing to do with myself. And all of the dreams and all of the things that I had done had everything to do with me finding that thing that I thought would make me happy or important or valuable. And I moved to Alabama the first day of 2007 to realize that there is some joy and fulfillment in serving others. And that was something I had done a civil rights tour in about 8 years ago. And when I got to Selma, does anyone know, who knows where Selma is or has heard of Selma? I know you have. A little bit. It's a tiny, tiny little place. I mean, tiny little place on the map. Dr. King referred to it as the most segregated place in the South in the 60s. I would probably make a case that it is the same even today. And we went on a civil rights tour. We went all over the South. We went through Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama and saw all these incredible museums and monuments and places where people were assassinated, like Dr. King and Jonathan Daniels and other people that really fought for all people's rights in the 60s. But when we got to Selma, there was something that felt like the history was still way too alive. The schools were segregated, are segregated completely. There's a complete segregation of the school system. That means that all of us would not be at the same school if we were in high school in Selma, Alabama. There is a completely all-white country club. There are issues beyond what we can even mention. The murder rate is 5 times the national average. There are horrible gang activities that start at 9 years old for the little kids in the neighborhoods. There's issue upon issue. I think there were 31 murders last year, which is a lot for a tiny little town. It's about 19,000 is the population. But something about it, you know, I couldn't get it out of my head after I visited. I visited Selma at the end of that tour and came back to Colorado, and it was like, it didn't leave me. Something stuck inside of me, and eventually I went back and stuck inside of it. I've been living there for almost 8 years now. And I went there with this heart full of grace, like Dr. King said, with all this hope that we could go there and make a difference and make some change, and then I could go back to my life. Because there was something that felt like I couldn't not do something after I saw what I had seen. And I think I told my friends that I'd be back in like 6 months, because I don't think I really fully grasped what it was that I was saying I was going to do. And so I moved there, and it's really incredible. Sometimes you see something, you have to do something, even if you don't know what it is. You just feel compelled that you have to do something. You have to say something, you have to do something to not let things sit the way they were. That's what happened to me. And so I moved there, and then several of the Freedom Foundation volunteers, the Freedom Foundation started in Colorado a couple years prior, just with the mission that we wanted to serve the underserved. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know how that was going to look in Colorado. We just knew that we were young people that were looking for a greater purpose than serving and living for ourselves, and so we were going to help somebody. And there were a lot of families and people that we were able to help in Parker and the surrounding areas, but when we went to Selma, we knew that that was something that matched up with the mission that we had not yet formed of the Freedom Foundation. So we moved, and consequently several volunteers of the Freedom Foundation moved to Selma just to get involved wherever we could to make a difference. We started doing social programs, we painted churches, we cleaned up neighborhoods, we did everything that we knew how to do, and eventually started our own theater program because we realized that the only way that we could have, maybe it's a different meeting there, the only way that we could create space, we needed to create some space for kids from both school systems to come, because they did not, there was nowhere for the students from the, well, so basically what happened, because you all know there was integration in the late 60s, Ronald was born and raised in Selma, and so by the time he went to school in the 70s, he was born in the 70s, and so by the time he went to school, schools were integrated. And so what happened was they resegregated in 1990, not by law, but because people wanted to. And there was enough people that were very loud. Sometimes it's not the majority's opinion that wins. Sometimes it's a very noisy, extreme opinion that puts enough fear in the rest of the people that it wins. And so the schools resegregated. And so when we arrived in 2007, we realized something had to be done. There had to be something that would afford an opportunity for all these kids to come from all these different places and get to know that they're more the same than different. And that nothing like that had been happening. We just came up with this crazy idea for RATCO, the Random Acts of Theater Company. We have some volunteers within our organization that have a background in theater and have actually had really good theater careers in big professional theater worlds, and so why not do what I did, which was leave a job where I was producing television for millions of people, and then I moved to a little town to do radio for a few thousand. So our theater people did the same thing. They left their comfortable jobs at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts or different places in different parts of the country, and they moved to Selma to help start a theater company so that we could have access to young people to be able to teach them a different way of living and a different way of looking at things. And that's how the Random Acts of Theater Company started, which is the flagship program of the Freedom Foundation and really the heart of what we do in Selma, because it is a place where all kids can come and find their voice and find a way to tell their story that I find incredibly inspiring. Our hope was that we could just touch a few lives and help inspire a few young people to see that their lives could be so much bigger than the confines of the walls of Selma. And what has ended up happening is these young people have taught us so much about overcoming and so much about becoming what it's in your heart to be, even though nothing around you tells you that it's possible. And I am so grateful that we've had this opportunity. So, I think that there has been harder things also. I realized that, when I played football, some of my worst injuries came from my own teammates. That, I think, was good for me because it made it so that I knew that the reason I was doing it was because I had a passion to do it, not because I was looking to please anybody else. I think it grew me up quite a bit. And it was a way I kind of proved my own self and won my way into the heart of a lot of guys that maybe didn't want me there otherwise. So I thought, broken nose or broken hand or a concussion from my own teammate getting spit at or certain things, I thought that was hard. And then I realized that living in Selma, there were harder things that I was going to endure. And maybe somehow the football experience was preparing me for what I was going to encounter later that I could have never foreseen, because really I just wanted to grow up and be like John Madden and either coach football or talk about football and live my cozy little life. But when we started doing the work that we do in Selma, we encountered all kinds of things. We were very much embraced by some people who were so excited and said, oh my gosh, we've been looking for you, we've been hoping for you, we've been praying for you for years. This town needs help. We're so glad that you were sent to do this. I mean, there were some people that were sure that people within our organization would be the next mayor, that we could help turn the city around, and there were other people who wanted us to leave and would do anything to help make that happen. We had our yard vandalized. We've had countless threats in real life, over the phone and over the internet. We've had horrible smear campaigns done on the radio and on the internet. I've had my family and friends called back in Colorado and other places with threatening phone calls from very scary voices that we don't even know how to identify. When we went on the radio, we met Ronald about a year into being in Selma, and he was born and raised there, so knew a lot of people. He came on the radio with us, which was a very positive thing, and because of that, I started getting death threats. There was a man who actually wrote and published the story of how he was going to murder me because he believed that God ordains murder if you murder a white woman and a black man, showing an affectionate and kind relationship toward one another. So I realized quickly that there were going to be some challenges with the work that I felt this hopeful heart full of love and grace to go down and try and conquer. And it was a good test for me because once again I found out that I was doing it not because I wanted to make everybody happy, but because it was the right thing to do. And I think there's something really important about that, because I think every day we're faced with choices where we can do the thing that is easy and comfortable, or maybe even a little bit selfish, or we can do the thing that may be a little uncomfortable but makes a difference for somebody else. And I think what I realized was that there was something I found that was really interesting and completely unfulfilling about my life in broadcasting, and my life in doing all these amazing things that I had set out to do. And I found the truest joy and contentment when I actually switched my direction and started doing things just to serve others, like Dr. King's quote. And then I realized that the challenges in that kind of adventure are a little bit more difficult than the challenges in a very personal and a personally driven adventure, but I realized that the reward has been much greater also. it's hard to explain it, but I think even that little music video, and if you guys heard the call at the beginning, that is not strange in Selma. You heard the man's voice that said, you know, why do you think blacks and whites should be together? That was a call we fielded live on a radio show. And that is something that the Jim Crow laws of the South would have said that integration was fine up until 5th grade, because the big fear was after 5th grade, if there was integration, then there was a chance of people dating, or God forbid getting married and reproducing, and that we would change the course of the white race. And there's mindsets that still exist in certain parts, I know of all over, but maybe more overtly in Selma, where we live, that kind of permeates through, and that kind of mentality is not in everybody, but it's in a small enough group of people that is noisy and gives enough of a fear tactic that it affects everybody, which is why the schools have resegregated and why people are divided, and why that video of those kids dancing is so precious to me, because these kids have found this space to find their own voices and also find friends that may not look just like everything they've ever seen, but connect in a way that they couldn't explain. And so progress is definitely coming. It's a little bit slower than maybe I thought it would be, but we have been able to do incredible things. We're building a building to be able to house our programs, and that is something that we've done all the demolition ourselves, so sometimes after a hard day we would all just sledgehammer some things off the walls. And we're in a place now to start building. The young men that were singing the song were actually dancing on the new roof. And so we have a new roof on our building and are getting ready to finish the exterior. Should be done by March, which is incredible. March marks the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. That's when many young civil rights movement workers marched for their right to vote, and were beaten, bloody, cattle prodded, and tear gassed. And that footage of that, you can find it online, and I think there were a few clips in the video. That's what really got the attention of the nation. And Dr. King came to Selma after that point, and eventually they were able to march all the way to Montgomery, where Dr. King delivered a great speech, and at the end of that, President Johnson awarded the right to vote to all people. So Selma did big things, right? I mean, that was really important in the movement, but I think sometimes has either forgotten or been made to forget some of the progress that was fought for and bled for, and even a few people died for that. It's interesting, we talk about it a lot, it's an interesting phenomenon, but in the 60s, there were 4 people that were murdered in the civil rights movement in Selma. The first was Jimmy Lee Jackson. He was killed. That was the murder that felt like it kind of incited the people to say, we've got to do something. We'll carry his body to Montgomery if we have to. And then when people came from the north and the west and from all over to come and help out and to do this march that would really peaceably protest for this right to vote, there were 3 white people that were murdered. A Unitarian minister named James Reed, a housewife, Viola Liuzzo from Detroit, Michigan, who came down just because she heard the call and had to do something, I can understand, and a young graduate from MIT named Jonathan Daniels. They all came down to help Selma and all lost their lives, young lives that were lost. And even that speaks to the mentality that this very extreme racist mindset has, that if they stopped the white people, then they could stop the movement, because they were so ignorant in their thinking that they believed that there was no way the movement could make it without white people helping. So there's all these deep-seated, crazy mindsets that still exist today. We're talking about something that happened 50 years ago, and we know that there's people that are still, I've met some of them on both sides, some of the people that marched in the Bloody Sunday March, and some of the people that were on the other side beating them. And those people all still live in this tiny little town. So some of that creates the energy around the work that we're trying to do. And the hope is that there's all these young people that don't know enough to be afraid of people that don't look like them yet. There's all these young people that want to have everything that maybe their hearts would dream of, but that they haven't seen. There are several of our young people that we work with that don't have fathers in the home because they're in prison. Maceo, who is doing a lot of the dancing on the videos, dad's in prison for murder. That is not uncommon. And so to have people like Ronald and other volunteers that are part of the Freedom Foundation helping just by leading, just by doing, just by being an example of the things that these young men could grow up to be has been a really powerful thing. And so I feel like the work that we're doing is worth it, even though it comes with a little bit of a price. And so we have seen, we've gotten awards for courage, and not in Selma, but outside. We've gotten awarded for our project and our work and our courage. We've been able to bring the kids We've taken groups of young people all over, to New York, to Washington, D.C., to Colorado, to be able to share their story so other people can hear about what is still happening in our country, but also so that these young people can see that there's a big world outside of them that really is for them, that they are not just confined to the walls of Selma, which tell them that they are too fill in the blank because they hear it all, too black, too poor, too dumb to be anything. And it's not just black kids, it's all of the kids that we get to work with, which is a really diverse group and feels like the way that it should be. And the way that it is for a lot of us where we've come from, but not the way that it has been as a social norm in Selma. So I have really been gifted with a path that has been opened up to me, and I think all I did was just make a decision to try and do something for somebody else instead of just living my dreams. And it's amazing how when you do that, other people's dreams can become your dream. And they are actually much more fulfilling than anything you could do on your own. That is what I have found. And so the way that I have chosen to lead is simply to live something worthy of others to follow. I don't think that we always do things because it looks like something that we'll get an award for. John Lewis, the congressman, he marched in the Bloody Sunday March. He was on the front line. He was beaten. He did not march back 40, 50 years ago so that he could become a member of Congress, which he has been for a long time. He marched because he wanted everybody to have the right to vote, not knowing that we would ever have a black president in his lifetime, not knowing that he would ever be not only awarded, he didn't know they'd be awarded a right to vote, let alone that he would be voted into office. And I can appreciate that. Sometimes you do the right thing in the moment because it's the right thing, and then later it becomes something that's popular to other people. I think Dr. King was much less popular when he was alive than after his passing, because there was a lot of people that didn't agree with what he was doing or what he was trying to do. And I know I've drawn a lot of inspiration from his life and some of the things that he did that weren't popular at the time, but were the right thing. So I wanted to show you guys, so that documentary, there's a documentary being made called I Will Dance. It actually was just completed and it's being entered in film festivals all over. And we haven't heard back from Sundance yet, but this young man, there's a young man, a young filmmaker that came to Selma, spent his time, spent his money, traveled with the Random Acts of Theater Company and went home and spent a year logging film that none of us knew about. And he was so inspired by the work of the Freedom Foundation and what was happening in Selma that he wanted to make that his first major project. And he created this film to be able to tell a little bit of the story, because he also realized somewhere in the middle of film school that all he wanted to do was tell stories that matter. And he picked the Selma story to tell. So that music video is what we started out with, and I wanted to show you the trailer. It's just a couple minutes long if you're up for it, and then you'll see a little bit more of our kids and what we're up to in Selma. Plus, this is a film that we could bring to you.
Some people say drugs release stuff. Dancing is my drug. It's just me trying to get like all the bad stuff out of my day that happened.
There's a lot of crime, a lot of violence, a lot of shootings that happen here with young people, and it's scary just even to walk down the street in some places. A lot of kids grow up not believing they have anything to offer anybody.
It's all we know. All around us, kids are black, our parents are black. I'm pretty sure it's the same for the white kids.
It's hard to break through to someone who's in that and say, listen, you have a future.
Right at the top is a huge letters that says, I had a dream.
This is not normal.
Every single kid has so much potential. It's like when you start dancing with a group of people who love to dance, you could be the worst dancer in the world, you're still gonna want to do
If I didn't come to Radco, I would just dance all day until I found Radco.
nobody's ever told them like, hey, I have faults too. You know, I messed up in life too. But hey, I got through that, and let me show you how to get out of that.
They don't see a lot outside the walls of Selma.
We're getting ready to do something really cute.
I've always wanted to see a show on Broadway. I've always wanted to do a show on Broadway.
No, we can't be on Broadway, but it's true. We're gonna be on Broadway.
This will be a night in New York City. They'll know that rats come to see.
This is insane. Wow. I don't think I've experienced anything like that in my entire life.
Don't wait on someone to say, what are we gonna do? You be that someone.
They can see how big it is out there. They'll start to see how big their own life can be.
My story could be a person's chance of life and death.
I would dance until you realize it was makes me me. I would dance because I'm free.
That seemed like a fun way to show you a little bit about what I'm talking about. Those are some of the young people that we get to work with all the time. And it's a great thing that Joseph East is the filmmaker, and he did that all on his own, and then was able to get a very successful Kickstarter campaign last year to finish the production of the film. So it's complete, and it's ready to be seen, and maybe even would come to a campus near you at some point. But that is a little bit, again, just a little way I wanted to show you some more about the work that we're doing. But I think that I would love to entertain if there's any questions that you all have. And I will offer Ronald Smith, my partner in nonviolent crime, to answer the questions as well, or to share a little bit if you guys desire. But if you have any questions, just I'd love to hear them. Yes, Jen.
How is that possible? And maybe I don't understand how school systems can work. How can you have segregated systems that couldn't be a falter of the lawsuit?
Great question. She's just asking, how can it be possible that the schools are segregated and not have some kind of crazy lawsuit? So because the schools have resegregated voluntarily, what has happened is in 1965, when integration was forced, they developed a private school named John T. Morgan Academy, named after a Confederate general. And that was the school that they chose so that people who didn't want to integrate the schools would have an option for their kids. And so that was the lifeblood of the white supremacists and racists in the 60s. So after, in about 1990, some call it white flight, there was a big riot and a bunch of things that happened in the school, and some of it was at the hand of some extreme radicals on the black side of the community. And so some things went down in the school that put all this fear, and then there's a lot of talk, and people sort of muttered among themselves, we're not safe, our kids aren't safe, we've got to get them out. And 100% of the white population ended up drawing out after that all happened in 1990. So they all go to the white schools, which are private, and then the public schools are 100% black. And the way that the private schools have done it is, in order to be part of a private school, you have to fill out an application, fix your picture. Your photo has to be attached to your application, and you have to take the test that they've decided to give you, which you never see the results to. So based on their requirements and their standards, you may or may not make it in, and it may or may not have anything to do with your color, but it just so happens that they have never allowed a black person to attend their school, except one of our volunteers, Sean and Tylisa Black, they enrolled their daughter when she was in kindergarten, because when you are going to kindergarten, there's no test to be taken. So they had filled out the application and put her picture on it, and they filled it in. And some of the very open-minded board members who have told us over and over for years that they are all for integration, they just haven't had the right candidate yet, approved her application, and she went to school there for 2 years. So one of the little girls in our RATCO was the first black student ever, and only, to be at Morgan Academy. And that was around the time that we started getting a lot of hate mail. They were very kind to her, which is great, and they were actually very kind to her parents. It's so ironic that their last name is Black. So they'd be in these school meetings, and they'd say, we want to welcome the Black family. I mean, if you think about, there is a little bit of humor in that, but it was hard for her, because when she was there, she was treated really well, but the education actually wasn't as good as they had hoped, and they had to pay money to be there. And at some point, Sean and Tylisa said, hey, I think it was good. and I'm glad we have the opportunity, but I'm not sure this is the best thing for her. And I've known other students that have gone up. There was a young girl that we worked with that was part of our RATCO, and she came home from school one day and she said, did you know that Abraham Lincoln was anti-American? She started telling me all these things, and I said, where did you read that? Show me in your textbook where you read it. She said, oh no, it was the teacher's lecture talking about state rights and all these things. And I'm thinking, they are teaching the Confederacy in this school. And I sat her down, I was like, unless you see it in a history book and 3 other people can confirm it outside of your school, you can't believe anything they tell you, And there's little subtleties, like they don't acknowledge MLK Day, they take Robert E. Lee Day as their holiday. Just little things that they do to continually reinforce the message. And they don't know it. There's a lot of people that I think, and I know this sounds crazy, but I think there are some people that can have what seems like a racial mindset without really knowing it, because it's just their conditioning. There's a lot of people I've met in Selma that played with little Confederate soldiers because that's what their granddaddy was, not because they really understood. Some people really thought that the Civil War was the war between states about money and power, not associating it with slavery. So there's a lot of idiosyncrasies, but that's how they did it. It's volunteer. And it's by choice, and people don't have to be segregated, but at the same time, if you live there, you would have to make the decision that you want your child to be the first to go back into what has become the all-black school. And there's a lot with that, because even though there's good people in all the schools, they have some hurt and some issues and some filters based on those experiences.